Hello and welcome to The Olive Tree with me, Stuart Fisher, the programme that for the past 10 years has followed the story of what God is doing in Israel and the West Bank through the lives of the believers in Jesus who live there. The numbers may be relatively few, but they are growing steadily to the point where some believers are preparing to leave Israel and go abroad as missionaries to other nations. One congregation in Netanya is sending a missionary to Uganda. Recently, they also sent a group of young people, Arabs, Jews and Palestinians, to Europe, where they joined with young German Christians for a street mission. Listen now as Stuart Fisher talks to Evan Thomas, the pastor of Beit Asaph congregation in Netanya, to find out more.
Stepping aside from the Uganda mission, which although we went in and got our hands dirty and worked alongside the locals and building and unloading materials, getting out in the villages and praying with people, but just working and walking alongside the locals really impacted because they're just not used to seeing white people actually doing that at all. And once they got over their initial amusement and perhaps even a certain level of discomfort, they began to see that this was something indeed amazing. We would emphasize the fact that we were coming from Israel and why that was important, that Israel was reconnecting in its mission call. The impact on us coming out of that was life-changing. I can't say it in any other way. First of all, you learn, how dare I complain about anything when you are living in those conditions alongside people that this is not a 2-week stint, but a lifestyle. It makes you deeply appreciate the privileged life that we live. But taking that on to a recent mission trip in August, where Marla and I took a team of young adults, Israelis, Messianic believers, and Arab Christians, and Palestinian Christians from the West Bank. We took this team out to Germany, to Bavaria specifically, and combined with a team of equivalent age young German Christians, we appointed leaders from each of those 3 sectors, and we basically provided a pastoral backup to them and trained in team building, and then went out on the streets along the riverbanks of the river Salzach and very nearby Salzburg, Austria, and then up into the inner city areas of Munich. Highly creative, multi-gifted group of young people, musically brilliant, and then some of the group were highly experienced young evangelists, some of them complete novices and terrified at first of approaching people, but probably, fluent in Arabic, Hebrew, Russian, English, German, Romanian, Amharic. And of course, we just turned loose on people, but not in a heavy confrontational way. We sat down with people in parks. We would be open and free with people that were clearly struggling in life. Some of them we could identify as having physical disability and illness. We would freely go and ask people if they would like prayer. We watched as people literally were physically healed in the street. And many, when asked, would they like to receive the Lord that just healed them, saying, absolutely. And I'm talking about people from Muslim backgrounds, German and Austrian people who have come from a more Orthodox Christian background, but really were totally secular. All sorts of people were open to us, young and old, drawn to the music, drawn to people just sitting down with them in restaurants. And the latter part of your question, the impact, since we returned, we created a WhatsApp group just so that we're in full communication with one another during the outreach. We've kept it, and now it's become a network of testimony. So all the young people and ourselves, the not so young, coming back out of the fields, going back into our workplaces and family environments and so on, it's been non-stop. And we've created a lifestyle. And so now on this network, we just share our testimonies with one another. It's just a great joy. And then, of course, it's so infectious.
Sounds utterly incredible. So what's next? It just seems to be an incredible journey that your congregation is on. Where do you go from here?
Well, what we've done with these Yad B'Yad programs, the hand-in-hand programs, it's literally taking the Gospel of John, chapter 17, verse 21, literally. And in that prayer of Yeshua's, it's an appeal to the Father that we, the disciples, would be one. He understood that there would be a great temptation to be factionalized, suffer from disunity. So he's appealing to the Father. And then the latter part of that verse, he says, so that those who would believe in the future, they would know that you, Father God, have sent the Son. And so what you see is this appeal for unity, for reconciliation in the body, as being a forerunner for mission. And that's really what motivates us. So where to from here? We'll continue with the Yad B'Yad programs. We will already setting dates and looking for locations for the summer of next year in Europe again. But in the meantime, we're also, the young people are highly motivated to seek out local outreach opportunities. So just today, my young colleagues and I sat and we've set dates for October, and we're going to take the Yad B'Yad team, young Arabs, young Jews, and do an outreach in central Nazareth. Take our music, Hebrew and Arabic, and just talk to people and pray for them and recruit from the local believers in the area. So this is the sort of thing we'll do. We are already creating community, and from that community we will draw people with the skill sets that can focus on worship, can focus on prayerful intercession, and those that are skilled in evangelism, skilled in apologetics, and just win people for the Lord.
This work you're doing, would you say it's quite unique at the moment for a Messianic congregation in Israel, or are you seeing similar calls to mission developing elsewhere?
It's a great question, because I think for a good few years there's been a real lull in the more what we would call high-profile evangelism approach. I think the effectiveness to social media evangelism kind of replaced the face-to-face approach. And now we see a real restoration of there's nothing quite like just going and being with people. The fact is that we are drawing our numbers from a variety of congregations, and clearly I'm showing you that it's not just Messianic, but bringing Arab Christians and Messianic Jews together and giving them common purpose so that we can impact one another's communities. So I have a hunch that very quickly it will become infectious and it's going to start to spread all over the country.
You mentioned the importance of unity between believers from different backgrounds across Israel, and that must be one of the powerful message, especially the work in Germany of having Palestinian Christians from Bethlehem and Messianic and Arab Christians all working together for the single purpose of evangelism. How easy is it to work with churches from all these different areas across Israel and the West Bank? How do you go about that?
One of the great advantages for me is that I've spent 40 years in reconciliation, networking, and ministries. So I'm very well known. I talk about 3 separate communities, well known amongst the Palestinians of the West Bank, Gaza, well known amongst the Arab Christians of the Galilee and central Israel, and well known, of course, amongst the Messianic community, because we're pioneers here. So there's a high trust level there, and that we can use to our advantage. As long as we don't compromise that, it means that I can go to leaderships, of various congregations and communities from these 3 sectors and say, would you be prepared to recommend a couple of your young people to take part in this? This is what I'm going to do. This is what Marla and I will do with them. This is what it will involve. And I promise you, when they come back, you will have a couple of on-fire, changed young disciples. And pretty much in every case, they're more than willing to give us a shot. And of course, the results speak for themselves. So I'm just thinking of a pastor from Bethlehem. He received 2 that joined us this summer. One was his son, and the other was a young lady from his congregation. They came back so on fire, both having experienced a lot of healing just by building relationships with their Jewish counterparts and working alongside them, finding an opportunity where they could reach out safely to Muslims. The young lady experienced a healing gift. I mean, she was amazing. She came so quiet and withdrawn, and yet by the time we reached Munich, I was watching her kneeling down, praying for people for healing of their legs, and watching people healed. I mean, it was astounding. So she's not going to be the same. And the impact of that on her own community is incredible. When a young Ethiopian Jewish believer testified before his congregation 2.5 weeks ago, his pastor called me up afterwards. He said, this young guy, in the year leading up to the outreach, had got to the point that he was asking such big and difficult questions that no one could answer in his own community, let alone in his family, that he had actually begun to withdraw from congregational life, frustrated. He came on the outreach with us, basically very skeptical, figured that if nothing else, he'd have a nice trip away. This guy had such an encounter with Yeshua while we were out there that it literally turned his entire life around, and he testified before his family and the whole congregation. And this pastor said there was just no one in the congregation that was not just openly weeping, howling with gratitude to the Lord, with tears, and just to see this young man's life turned around.
You've been listening to Evan Thomas, a Messianic Jewish pastor from Netanya, talking to Stuart Fisher. I hope you found that story encouraging. The Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund is a Christian charity based in the UK that supports the needs of both Jewish believers and Arab or Palestinian Christians living in Israel and the wider Middle East. If you'd like to know more about our work through our bi-monthly newsletter, including news about our upcoming tours, please either visit our website www.olivetreefund.org or write to me, Julia Fisher, OTRF, PO Box 402, Billingshurst, RH14 4BQ in the UK. Meanwhile, join me at the same time next week for another story from the Olive Tree. Until then, goodbye.